David Seymour.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise on behalf of the ACT Party in opposition to this bill, and I'd like to walk back to a couple of the contributions we've already had in this debate. In particular, Clayton Mitchell, who really took us back to the 1950s, making his entire contribution about mothers. Mr Speaker, he spoke about mothers so much it was getting somewhat Freudian. Well, perhaps he has missed the point that this is about paid parental leave for fathers and mothers rather than just mothers. And Mr Speaker, we heard from Sue Moroney a rather veiled inference that somehow men are not eligible to speak in terms of this debate. Nowhere near as explicit or as bad as Clayton Mitchell from the 1950s. She didn't mean it to come out, but it came out. So, Mr Speaker, let's be clear that this is a debate about parental leave. Ian Lees-Galloway, in his fine King's College debating form, said the questions are, is this bill necessary and can it be afforded? And his argument was that it's necessary because other OECD countries on average have longer paid parental leave periods. Well, Mr Speaker, if this Parliament made laws on the basis that we should always regress to the OECD mean, then we would never ever have voted for women to be able to vote in general elections or a large number of other policy innovations that this country has made. We also would have adopted a number of very bad public policies, and this would be an example of that if we were to adopt Sue Moroney's bill. But then he made the argument that it is affordable. Well, Mr Speaker, this has always been about politics for the Labour Party, and funnily enough, Jacinda Ardern in an earlier debate actually betrayed the Labour Party and showed us just how political this has always been. Because, Mr Speaker, Jacinda Ardern tells us that when there was a $2.5 billion surplus in 2002, that's when the Labour Party, under pressure from the Alliance Party, first introduced paid parental leave. Then in 2004, 2002 was an election year, remember, then in 2004, when the National Party's polling went up and the surplus was $5.6 billion, they decided to introduce extensions to paid parental leave. Then, when there was no surplus at all, but the Labour Party did not have the burden of governing, they were keen to further extend paid parental leave. When it suits them, they make the argument about fiscal responsibility. When it doesn't suit them, they don't talk about fiscal responsibility at all. But the reality is that the current situation is not one of the government having a large surplus. It is not time to consider such large spending increases. And when the Labour Party are in government, they know that very, very well. And why is this purely political, Mr Speaker? The fact is that paid parental leave is not a reality for half of New Zealanders who have children. In this country, every year, there are 60,000 babies born, give or take. And how many actually sign up for paid parental leave, Mr Speaker? Fewer than 30,000. So this cannot be necessary. If it is necessary, then what do we say to the half of parents who have children and yet do not take advantage of paid parental leave? Mr Speaker, the fact of the matter is that this is purely political, it is purely posturing, it is purely vote buying on behalf of the Labour Party. But there is one small innovation in policy in this area that I'd like to take a little bit of credit for. Because one thing the state should do, and one reason we pay taxes, is to give people financial compensation in times of unexpected need, such as having babies prematurely. And I'm pleased this government has introduced additional paid parental leave for people who find themselves in unexpected situations, but also to be part of a government that opposes wholesale vote buying that only affects half the population, that is based on the shonkiest of research and will make no difference to most people except for the Labour Party and their polling. Well, folks, you're going to have to work a lot harder to make this work. I oppose this bill. Thank you, Mr Speaker.